This is Voces de Cambio, a history project in which we aim to focus on community members who we believe have made a really great impact in the city of Pomona. My name is Melanie Andrea.
I'm Michelle Coronado.
I'm Iris Villalpando.
And my name is Linda Hinojos.
We're glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
First, do you want to give us a little rundown of what you do and who you are in the community?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Linda. I have lived in Pomona my entire life, so 31 years. My parents bought a house here and we were born and raised in Pomona. I live in the industrial zone, so the southeast side of Pomona, and that's really where I started to realize my surroundings as I was growing up, and once I started my academic career as a student, forever student, I kind of started to put two and two together in terms of how my environment looked in my neighborhood and how the environments looked in my friends' neighborhoods who lived in Phillips Ranch and Diamond Bar. So I kind of started to realize this is really different, and that really launched me into my community work and being really invested in my community.
So how did you first start to get involved and make changes?
So I grew up right in the middle of all of the commercial businesses and recycling centers. And growing up, the big semi trucks would come down our street, and we were little, so you don't know. So we'd be like, hey, do this. And so they would honk their horn, and that was fun for us, and that was exciting. And the train would go by literally 500 feet from our house, and something we watched every day. And then when I started my undergrad, I started to read about environmental justice issues, and I studied sociology. And then I was like, wait, having a train by your house isn't exactly the best and healthiest thing. And having semi-trucks roll down your street, hundreds of them every day, is also not cool, And so I really started to realize that it wasn't just my community, but in communities of color across not just the state and not just the nation, but globally, are faced with the same types of issues that we in Pomona have. And so I started to pay more attention, and it really got off when the Pomona Waste Transfer Station was introduced into the neighborhood as a potential project. And for me, I just said, this is kind of enough. My family lives here, my tias and tios live next door, and there's hundreds of families in the area, and a trash station that's gonna generate hundreds of truck trips a day. Regionally, having people from other cities come to dump their stuff is not a good idea. It doesn't belong in a neighborhood where Washington Elementary School is down the street, and then we had the Village Academy and other schools. And so I decided that was enough for me to kind of start knocking on doors by myself and try to get neighbors aware and residents aware of what was going on. And the thing is, nobody knew about the trash station. And our community in that area specifically is Spanish speaking and low income, and so there's a lot of issues tied to that as well. So that's really where it started. Also, though, I have to give credit to my dad, because he had started his own movement when I was 13, taking me door to door knocking to address a wood recycling center on our street also. And they had it's a huge grinder, and they grind pounds and pounds of wood, and the sawdust just goes in the air. It's like a giant machine. And so it's just chipping away and like dust. And so we've been dealing with a lot. And so it started when I was 13 really, and then I just carried it on with the waste transfer station.
How would you describe the image or representation of Pomona that you hear the most?
So having lived in Pomona for a very long time, I think I've always been aware of kind of what outsiders see and what they perceive Pomona to be. And, it's kind of hurtful, I think, growing up and when I was in Philadelphia and in Simons, we didn't really talk about Pomona the way that other cities talk about Pomona. Like me and my friends weren't bashing, Pomona or saying bad things about our city. When I got to Diamond Ranch, and there was kids from like Diamond Bar and Phillips Ranch, which is also part of Pomona, and I heard them talk about Pomona. It's kind of like when I started to realize like, oh, this is what people are saying, or this is what the image is. And so for me, we hear a lot of the, back then it was more like gangs and, just crimes, high crime, high gang areas. And then the conversation has shifted now to really the issue being, the image of homelessness as a really big problem. And so I think those are the messages that, I hear when I hear people talk about Pomona. I think that's the image that, it's a very negative image of the city.
What would you like to change about that?
So, I think, first of all, I don't think that is all Pomona is. I have grown up here, I'm raising my own child here, and we do have very significant issues, not just homelessness right now in the country. We're seeing a rise in homelessness everywhere, but we do have, significant issues that do have to do with environmental justice issues. The industrial zone is still very much under-regulated. There's very little oversight. Businesses kind of are growing out of control. They don't conform to regulations. They're operating without business licenses. They're still emitting pollutions and illegal dumping. So there's a lot of that stuff happening. So, I would just like to see a city where our residents are listened to. I think we are lacking dialogue between certain groups and that community engagement and, spaces for our youth to thrive. So I think those are the types of things I would like to see. Something more family inclusive, a cleaner city, definitely. We know that, our environment has a lot to do with our perception and our health. And so if we are neglecting parts of our city, what are we telling the people who live in those areas? That you're not important, that you're not worthy of funding or street cleaning or sidewalks or paved roads, paved streets without potholes. And so, I think overall, I wish to see a city that is truly invested in its community and who strives to, address issues at the core while engaging its residents.
I know you mentioned it a little about what inspired you to make a change in the community. Would you like to mention how did you help a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So the waste transfer station issue came up. Initially, I kind of started door-to-door knocking myself. And after one particular planning commission meeting where they proceeded to, I guess, approve the project or move the project forward, that was an insane meeting. It was over 200 people at that meeting. And everybody was upset. People walked out. Police were called into Western University. It was like a hall in Western University. And everybody was angry. People were angry that this trash station was moving forward. They were mad at the planning commission, mad at city council members, and people stormed out after that. Because the audience, including myself, we stood up and we started yelling at the council members or commissioners. I don't remember which group it was. And so people were being thrown out, like told to leave. And so out of rebellion, a lot of people ended up leaving, and everybody congregated outside. And that was like a perfect opportunity for me, because I saw a bunch of angry people, and I was like, this is a chance to do something. And so I pulled out my little notebook from my purse, and I was like, hey, if you want to organize against this trash station, put your name down in this notebook. And it just went around the room to a bunch of people, and I got phone numbers and names. And then, very quickly after, I decided this was something I wanted to do. And so I called those people and held the very first meeting at Washington Park. And everybody brought their own chairs. And it was just people who just had said no. It was moms, it was dads, it was grandparents, it was business owners, people in Pomona. And they were just like, we don't want this here. What do we do? And that was how I led weekly meetings on Mondays. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was an undergrad, and all I had was, like a really big easel. And I just strategized, okay, Wednesday is the planning commission meeting. This is what we're gonna say, this is what we want. And so week after week, I just kind of invented stuff as we went along, and it was working. We were having speakers at planning commission meetings and speakers at city council meetings. And that's really how that mobilizing started. And that movement grew, and so people started going to council meetings. People who had never spoken out before, who had never gone to city council meetings in Spanish and in English, people who have always had a voice, but our voices have always been never included, or they've been suppressed, quiet down, this is the decision, and that's it. And this was different. This time we were saying, we don't care if this is what you want. This is what we want. This is where we live. And so it was a lot of years of hard work, and a lot of years of my time invested in trying to organize against this. And that's where we formed United Voices of Pomona, Voces Unidas de Pomona. And it was just those people who wanted to be a collective part of fighting for the industrial zone, and fighting against environmental justice issues, and fighting for their right to live healthy and safe. And so that is how we started, and that's how it's carried on.
So in the future, what do you hope to accomplish with your work?
So, I think United Voices has really done a lot. We've assisted past council members with campaigns, and in terms of canvassing and writing, expressing our support for certain candidates. And, the trash station movement was really amazing in that people realized we have a power in our voting. And when we tell people, or when we told people, this person supported the waste transfer station and they're up for re-election, get them out. People were out, literally, council members that had been there were unseated. And we put, John Nolte, who was part of United Voices of Pomona, who was a prominent figure in Pomona, ended up being city council member. And that, I would say he had already, he's been around Pomona, but he was with us. He was in our group. He was just as invested. And so, that was kind of the magic that happened in realizing we can unseat people who are making these decisions that are benefiting them, who are getting campaign donations, who are, it's kind of like, you scratch your back, I scratch your back, you scratch my back, backroom dealings. And that was really cool. And so that's something I think that has carried with us, and especially like in my mentality, I really think that mobilizing is a lot of work. It's very hard work, and you have to put a lot of time into it. And I haven't been able to do as much as I used to because I'm a mom now. But that really taught me something. You know, people have the power to change things. And sometimes our council members forget that they are here to serve us instead of the other way around. And so if they're doing things that are not benefiting the community, then the community has the right to say, we want you, we want you out. So, yeah. So hopefully, that continues.
What do you hope for the future of Pomona as community?
So I think I've said this earlier, and just more community engagement. It's hard to engage specific communities because of those, our communities face a lot of obstacles and barriers, language barriers, work schedule barriers, even documentation status. And sometimes people aren't open to getting involved directly or indirectly because there's a lot of challenges. But I think that the city has, a responsibility to all of its residents, not just the loudest ones, not just the ones who speak English, who live in certain areas of Pomona without going, in Ganesha Hills or in Lincoln Park. Like, they're not the only people who have a voice. There's a lot of people in Pomona who are not heard, who never will be asked, how do you feel about this? How can we improve? And so as a community, I really wish for there to be more outreach and engagement. I feel like that's lacking, and I feel like Pomona could benefit so much from doing work with community.
We would like to thank you for coming, and thank you for allowing us to know a little bit about you.
Thank you so
Really nice
much.
meeting you.
Thank you. I had a great time. Thank you, guys.
Do you have any advice or anything that you would like to offer to the youth or to the community?
I think we youth have a little bit more time. I know you guys are super busy studying, and you're going to go off to college one day, but while you're in Pomona, I think really find what you're passionate about and use that passion to help others. And when you go to college and you get your education, don't forget that you're still, don't forget your roots, don't forget where you come from, and always try to come back and help if you can. I think that's the message that I would give. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
yeah, no problem.